when I first met you, you had been sent by or volunteered to go as you were managing editor. In a way, I guess you were kind of preparing yourself for what eventually happened in 2003, which is you became the big guy. I assume they wanted to teach you a little finance, a little management.
Yeah, I was being prepared for the succession in 2001,
and then it
which
didn't
I
happen.
Didn't get.
It didn't happen.
Which
So
I
you,
didn't get.
so I'm
Right.
using code here. So Bill showed up to be part of an executive education program that is sponsored by the Wharton School called the Advanced Management Program. It's this sort of high-end program. Robin, who's one of the people who manages the program, is here. You remember Robin? There she is. Hi, Robin. Raise your hand, Robin. Don't be shy.
Oh, there you are. Hi.
And you spent 5 weeks with mostly business people, people who are COOs, CIOs, CFOs on their way to CEO, and you.
Right.
And I noticed as soon as you opened your mouth in our session, this was back in 2000, you were all about writing, you were all about poetic language, you were all about humanizing speech. And I had been reading your posts from the Soviet Union, which were amazing. And I knew you to be a journalist who cared about writing at the level of the sentence. It was proven to me in our conversation about poetry 12 years ago. So I want to invite you just to say to this group of young writers why, I assume you feel this way, why journalism is finally all about, we know that in the context of the anti-aggregation opinion, it's about content. But I invite you to use this platform here among students to say something about the importance of writing to journalism, which is sometimes underestimated, actually. Writing at the level of the sentence. That was the softest question I could ever have asked you, but you clearly care about writing.
Oh, I do a lot. You know, it's sometimes painful and sometimes fun. But you know, when you feel like you've got it right, there's just nothing quite as rewarding. I mean, if you break it down in the most unpoetic way, what journalistic writing, and I do this sometimes for journalism students just to assure them that the skills that they're learning are actually useful in a world, even if the future of journalism is bleak. You know, what you're doing is you're acquiring information from, in our case, often from people who don't want to give you the information. Sometimes from places where it's against the law to get the information, but
right.
You acquire information, you test it to find out if it's accurate or reliable. You look for patterns in it, you sort of sift through it, you sort through it, and then you test the theses that you derive from looking at the patterns in the words.
Right.
And then in the end, you have to somehow make all of that information accessible and appealing to somebody who probably didn't even know they were interested in the subject to start with. And that's, I mean, that last phase, it's all either writing or pre-writing. That last phase is the actual writing. And if you do all the first, first things in that series, but you can't write it, you miss the basic connection with the reader, I think.
To the extent that you left the executive editorship in order to write, to the extent that, I'm not asking you why you left the executive editorship, but to the extent that it's to write, that must be fabulous. And what do you have to say about the transition from desk-bound and mostly administrative and editorial to writing? This is it, you and the blank screen.
I spent 25 years, I guess, in journalism swearing I would never become an editor because it seemed desk-bound, sort of second-hand,
right.
And because you didn't really write. You rewrite other people's stuff, or you sometimes feel like a writing teacher, but you don't. It's not a writing job, and that was all. I managed to stick to that resolution until somebody asked me if I wanted to be the foreign editor of the New York Times, which is hard to say no to.
Yeah.
And then I spent from 95 on being an editor, and you cannot ask anybody to feel sorry for you when you're the editor of the New York Times. I mean, it is a great job, but I missed writing. I knew at some point I would go back to it. I actually thought it would be a little earlier than 8 years.
Did you really?
8 years is longer than any of my 3 predecessors held the job by a bit. And I finally decided, okay, we're at a point where I don't know if we've solved the digital problem, but we've made the newsroom fully digital. Everybody in the newsroom is writing for the website as well as for the print newspaper. They're thinking about the web. Psychologically, we're integrated. Business-wise, we're now integrated. We've got a model that where the website produces money.
And you had a successor you liked.
I had a successor that I love, who was fully qualified to take over the place, and and a strong bench. And it just feels like, okay, this is a really good time to go back to my first love.
Well, for those of us who've been reading your pieces since then, we're glad. Not glad that you stepped down from that fabulous position, but glad that you're writing.
Thank you.